Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
What's going on? Welcome into Big 10 Plus 4. We have a very excited Sam Sprunger over there. I'm Dalton Schutte with you. Glad to be with you this week.
Yeah, it's still like, the dog days of summer when it comes to, not a bunch going on sports-wise, but we're getting there. We're getting close.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of excited to talk a little bit about some of the things going on and maybe judge kind of where our fans are at this point, the sports fans, what are their interests at this point. But if you're new to the show, we're college sports with Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. One of the things wanted to talk about kind of with that, Sam, this new football league, the USFL.
You mean the old new the new old football league?
Yeah, football in America is becoming like the Disney movies where they just recycle old things they've already tried between
XFL.
The USFL, XFL. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, here's another recycled football league that failed the first time around. But it's kind of quirky because you have 8 teams here in this league, and they're all playing in Birmingham, Alabama. There are no home games for the inaugural season, at least. But I'm not sure if I can get into it. Are you into it at all?
Well, I don't know if it's one of those that they're trying to hope that it gets traction before they start letting the teams play at home. But I thought it was weird. I thought I live close to Michigan. Maybe I could go see a game. No, it's in Alabama. That's like a 12-hour trip.
Yeah, that's it made it pretty hard for me too to kind of claim a hometown team when
you can just throw a dart at a dartboard or at pictures and whatever one it hits, that's my team.
But there is, and forgive me because the name of the journalist escapes me, but somebody did track down how many Big Ten members are in this league, and there are 39 total. 39.
Not bad.
Does that maybe tilt anything, or is this kind of where you draw the line and say, you know what, I get it's Big Ten related, but I'm okay.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I personally, on a personal level, I don't follow hugely the NFL. I mean, I watch it, and I root for the Bears, but I don't live, eat, and die, with the NFL. I just don't. So the lesser leagues, I'm not really watching too much of it. I caught some of it this last weekend, and it seemed like it was a step above college football, basically, and so
I do appreciate though, not Big Ten related, the different camera angles they bring. They have that drone.
I did, yeah. Which I thought was really weird because it looked like the camera guy was running out onto the field with it, because before I realized it was a drone, and I'm like, they're really letting the guy just run out in the middle of the field? Is he standing there during the play? And then I saw the drone. I'm like, I'm stupid.
And then, of course, there was the camera in the helmet. A running back was running around and had a camera right there, so you could see what they see on the field. And I thought that was pretty cool as well. So I
have actually talked about this on another podcast before.
Ooh.
And my buddy and I were talking, and we said that they need to start putting cameras in helmets, because then you could premium that. If you want those camera shots, you have to pay a little bit more. Hey, I'm here to help the NFL get as much money as possible because I know that they're hurting.
Thank you for looking out for the little guy, Sam.
That's right.
You know what that tells me, though? It tells me that NFL 2K5 was so ahead of its time, that video game on the PS2 where you could look through your helmet and play. That was in 2005. They had that idea. That was
they're like the Simpsons of video games.
Kind of. But nonetheless, so USFL USFL is kicked up. It's got some Big Ten impact, some Big Ten flavor a little bit. The NBA playoffs, I know you're not big into the NBA. Do you find yourself rooting for Big Ten guys in the NBA playoffs?
No, not necessarily.
So,
not necessarily. I mean,
I get it. But
I look for the interesting story of the playoffs, and I'll start watching that aspect. And hey, the Pelicans beat the Suns last night or a couple nights ago, so that evens the series. So that starts getting interesting. So I'll pay attention to that.
So really, the only thing where you see still a Big Ten framework or Big Ten rooting interest during this time of the month is just the off-season news with Big Ten basketball, Big Ten football.
Pretty much,
right?
And then if there's any baseball going on that catches my eye,
but there's not much
off season.
Not too much Big Ten flavor in baseball. So, really for Big Ten and for this show, we could take a look at the offseason because, hey, there's some news here too. It was just announced. I'm getting a little delusional on which day is which for when we record, but a short while ago, we'll put it that way so it's not time sensitive. Kofi Cockburn just declared for the NBA draft, and he is not going to retain his collegiate eligibility.
I am surprised by that because we talked about it last week. I think was the NBA isn't conducive to his size, so he's going to have to. Was he going to drop some pounds and try to get faster? Because his style of center, there's not a lot of them in the league any longer.
Right. No, you're spot on.
So good luck to him. I'm surprised by it. I really am.
I mean, we talk about like in the NBA, Rudy Gobert, and he's labeled by some as cement shoed at times. Like he can't really get out on the perimeter. He's got to stay at the rim. That's Rudy Gobert. He can move a lot easier than Kofi Cockburn. So to your point, I absolutely agree. I wish the very best for Kofi.
Sure.
And if he saw this was great. Like my point isn't to criticize the decision, but I am curious how it fits. It does seem kind of square and a round peg like type of thing with Kofi, because you're right. That was yesterday's NBA. I mean, we've seen kind of the dinosaurs shoo out in the last 10 years. Man, Dwight Howard at one point was the best player in the NBA.
I was just getting ready to say that.
Like that day's gone. Yeah. So we'll see how this kind of plays out. But for Illinois, now the Illini, you lose Kofi, you lose Curbelo, you lose Payne, who transferred out, you lose Plummer. Like there are a lot of shoes to fill in for Illinois. And then in my rooting interest, Michigan State, Julius Marble transfers out.
I was going to say, yeah.
And
best
goodness,
mustache in the Big Ten.
He is just the best, and it's such a bummer. I mean, if this is what's best for him, go on, be great wherever you go. And honestly, like,
does he go to Iowa?
He's somebody who, if he's not in the Big Ten, it's not that he can't play in the Big Ten because he's proven he can, but if he's not having to guard a 7-foot giant of a human being that's 300 pounds every night, like Julius Marble's production will go up. He's going to be able to dominate somewhere. Like the guy's 6'8", 6'9". It's taxing to ask him to guard the Zach Edey's and then Kofi's every other night. Luka Garza's like,
right.
Like it just he's undersized at the 5, and if he can find somewhere where maybe you don't go against 7'4", because he was exceptional still at Michigan State. Like he's the guy you would want as like your backup big to come off the bench. I don't know if I've ever seen him miss a 15-footer or 18-foot jump shot. The baby hook is as automatic as it gets, and that's at the Big Ten level. So we'll see where he lands, but I certainly root the best for him because this is somebody who really, really impresses me, Sam, off the court.
Yeah, you mentioned that a couple of times because I texted you and said, hey, that's a killer mustache. And you're like, the dude is one of just the smartest kids on the team. And
he's amazing. He's a civil engineering degree. And I've talked with him in the past, and his goal is to go overseas and help set up infrastructure in third world countries, under impoverished areas, to do stuff like that. The guy knows Latin. Like, the guy is incredible. Yeah, I mean, he's amazing. And all this while he's playing at Michigan State and trying to handle all this. He was in theater a little bit. Like, the guy is just so awesome. And shortly around the time he got to Michigan State, he actually lost his father, and which was a terrible story, where his father got hit in the head one day at work, and a couple days later ended up passing away. But yeah, Julius Marble, I cannot root hard enough for Julius Marble. I'm very excited to see what's next for him, because I love Julius Marble.
I don't know much about him other than, what I've gotten from you. So I wish him luck. Just as he did give Purdue some fits once in a while. So stay out of the Big Ten.
Oh, fair enough. So later on in the show too, just to let the listeners know, we are going to be joined by a guest, Dustin Schutte from Saturday Tradition is going to be joining us. What's the finger wag for there, Sam?
No, I was doing sorry.
Oh, okay. Shooty. Little finger guns. I think we should do that as soon as he joins us, so that we can really impress him.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love that.
But we'll talk with him a little Big Ten football, some other things too, because he talk about impressive people. The range of things he covers kind of impresses me, because I just saw last week he wrote an article on Big Ten softball. He's into Big Ten basketball, Big Ten football at all times. So this is somebody who really fits in with what we're trying to do as a show. So excited to talk to him. And I believe,
absolutely,
I believe he's from Indiana, a Hoosier, like what Sam and I are. Well, here's the thing. We have to be careful with the wording Hoosier, because both Sam and I are from the state of Indiana. We're Hoosiers, but we're not those Hoosiers. We have no affiliation with Indiana University. Yes, like
I am not from IU. Okay,
that's right. So we'll touch base with him and have some fun there as well. But as we take a look at this show, real quick before we take our first break, Big Ten basketball. Since we're talking about a couple of the bigs that have transferred out.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fog is so thick right now, we have no idea how to even start doing a pecking order. I saw like a projection of teams to make the NCAA tournament like just yesterday on my phone.
Come on.
There's no way. I mean, look, we talked about Illinois and all the pieces they lose. Look at Michigan State right now. Your front court consists of Madi Sissoko, Jackson Kohler, who's coming in as a freshman, Malik Hall, and maybe Joey Hauser. There's not enough there to grade right now. Right. It's just not. Like, that's a huge hole that sits in that 5 spot that has to be figured out in the transfer portal, or else you're really going to grade this Michigan State team a lot differently than where they currently sit right now.
Well, they could overachieve if they just went by how they were graded now, because, they're going to be better. Probably. I mean, more than likely, they're going to be a lot better than what you would project them to be right now with their roster as is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think I saw in the article, Michigan State was listed as like a 5 seed for next year's tournament. And I'm like, boy, there's a lot to figure out before you start talking that way. Like,
aren't there like seniors that haven't committed yet? I mean, literally there could be people coming in that immediately make the roster better, and they just haven't committed yet. Come on, knock it off. They talk about the way too early. Well, this is stupid.
Yep.
I mean,
no, it is
because there's no way right now you can tell who's going to be the 1 seed overall next year. You just don't know.
You have what, around 1,500 players in the transfer portal right now?
Yeah. I do see that they're starting to commit. Finally, some of the bigger names on that list are starting to commit places, but like nothing huge yet, and once those dominoes fall, then you can start maybe piecing together where you think they might end up. Yep. That hasn't even happened yet. So let's cool the reins now.
Yep. I'm with you completely. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and hit the first quarter break.
Yes, sir.
All right, as we begin here in the second quarter, hey, we do have Dustin Schutte there with us. Dustin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Doing just
fantastic.
Fine. Glad to have managing editor from Saturday Tradition here with us. Were you back there for long, waiting in the back screen? Because we're still trying to figure out how to operationally kind of give these like wink, wink, nudge, nudges. Like, hey, our guest is here. If you want to
Yeah. Sorry, Dalton.
No, apologize. We're still early in this podcast and
Maybe
production meetings. Yeah.
Hey, I joined right in time to see the finger gun shooting thing there, so perfect timing for me.
Yep, there you go. So you might have heard our babbling for a moment there too. We're both from Northeast Indiana. I think I saw somewhere when I was Twitter stalking you that you went to Manchester.
I did. I went to Manchester College. I grew up in the Logansport kind of Kokomo area of Indiana.
Okay.
So North Central, I think, is what it's classified as.
Yeah, I know the general area. I didn't go there much.
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't much of a reason to.
No.
But 3 Hoosiers here on this podcast for Big Ten.
Watch it, Dalton.
Yeah, Sam. By the way, Dustin, Sam has a Purdue allegiance. He's got a Purdue interest, so we're very careful with the word Hoosier.
When I say Indiana, I'm talking about the state. When I say IU, I'm talking about that place in Bloomington. That's what.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Hey, I lived in Lafayette for about 2 years, so I'm very familiar with how ecstatic and or how much hatred there is between Purdue and IU. Let's say that.
Oh, for sure.
Well, we actually have quite a few different topics that we want to hit with Dustin on because Dustin covers quite a few different sports at Saturday Tradition, and just saw an article about Big Ten softball and Nebraska and their 18-game win streak. Maybe we even dive into their football, basketball. But let's start off, Dustin, with the NFL draft coming up next week and some of these Big Ten prospects. When you look at Aidan Hutchinson, this seems to be somebody who really not just is maybe the number one in the Big Ten, but maybe number one overall for this NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be getting a lot of attention, and he was a player kind of coming into the 2021 season that a lot of people were like, yeah, it's good that Michigan has him back, but is he going to be that kind of Chase Young type player that Ohio State had a few years ago? And I think he actually lived up to that kind of billing. I mean, he seemed to get progressively better. You look at that game against Ohio State and how he just plowed through. I can't remember if it was Thayer Munford or Nicholas Pettit-Frere, just with relative ease, that video going viral. What he did to Jack Plume in the Big Ten championship game, I mean, just obliterated him. So he's a player that I think he completely transformed his body. Like when he came back from that injury for the start of the 2021 season, you just looked at Aidan Hutchinson and you're like, this is a different cat than what we saw in the previous 3 seasons. And he lived up to that hype. And now it seems to be he's going to be the number one, or it seems the lowest projection for him is number 2 and staying with the Detroit Lions. So it's going to be really interesting. But the Big Ten has had a history, whether it's Chase Young, whether it's the Bosa brothers, Micah Parsons. They've had a history of producing really good defensive players. I think somewhere like 6 of the last 7, or I can't remember the number exactly, but have won the Big Ten Defensive Rookie of the Year award, like 5 of the last 6 years, 6 of the last 7, something like that.
Wow.
He's a kind of player that I think could potentially be in that conversation. I think he's that dominant. I think he's that NFL ready. And if he continues on that trajectory, I think he's going to be a really good NFL prospect wherever he lands.
I was going to say, Sam, do you want to throw in your Purdue question here since we're talking great defensive ends?
Well, that was going to ask. I wasn't necessarily going to jump in there and interrupt, but George Karlaftis, has he done this in the recent coming time? Because getting to be a first round draft prospect, he didn't start out at a first round. He was in the 3rd round. How has he progressed to get to that point? Sorry for the rambling.
Oh no, that's I ramble all the time. So better than you than me, right? I think one of the themes that I saw, and I don't know if I can point to, look, I cover the Big Ten. I can't tell you what George Karlaftis does with his hip motions or his swing moves or stuff like that. So I can't tell you exactly where his development came along. But what I can tell you is, I don't know. I just praised Aidan Hutchinson, right? I'm not sure that the gap between Aidan Hutchinson and George Karlaftis is all that big. The difference throughout the course of the 2021 season, if you watch Purdue and Michigan, you watch those games, Michigan had a stellar defensive line. They had David Ajabo. They had some other guys, Chris Hinton, that other offensive lines had to account for. Purdue had George Karlaftis, and that was it. So you would see offensive lines double and triple team George Karlaftis. So his numbers weren't quite there. For the longest time, guys like Joshua Perry, Jerry DiNardo, Howard Griffith, those guys on Big Ten Network had said George Karlaftis is the best defensive player in the Big Ten. And I remember them saying it's not even close. And this is with Aidan Hutchinson. This is with some of those other guys we mentioned, some good guys at Ohio State and Penn State. So I think that George Karlaftis, the way his body kind of evolved, the way he was so dominant and the way he drew the attention, that's what stood out to me. I think he's a great player. I think he has great athleticism. You'll appreciate this comparison. I think he's a carbon copy almost of Ryan Kerrigan. I think he has that kind of potential. So, but like I said, it's easy to pin Aidan Hutchinson as the premier defensive player because of the numbers he put up, because he was on the national stage, because Michigan was so dominant last season. But again, I don't think George Karlaftis was that far behind. His numbers just don't look as good because offensive lines throughout the Big Ten were able to focus on him because Purdue just didn't have anybody else that posed much of a threat.
No, Dustin, the reason why I asked that is because I've been praising him like his whole career, basically at Purdue, and people are like, oh, he's not even a first rounder. And now he has gone up draft boards, and now he is projected to be up there. And I always thought he was fabulous, a great leader, and very athletic.
I think the big difference there is winning 9 games certainly helps. Right. And the way that Purdue's defense, it was the best defense they'd had probably since Jeff Brom's first season, 2017. And then you'd have to go back quite a ways to when they had a defense even comparable to what they had in those 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. So I think that the fact that Purdue kind of transformed defensively and for a while there, they were winning games 13-9, right? They beat Illinois. They had a close game against Notre Dame that they maybe should have won. They should have beat Minnesota. But for that defense to completely transform under Brad Lambert, I think that maybe gave him a little bit more credibility. And again, when you watch the tape and see him getting double and triple teamed and still being able to put pressure on the quarterback and still being able to, return a fumble for a touchdown and get some sacks to his name, I think that's what made the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I can selfishly throw in a Michigan State question here too, because you talk about eight. Yeah, I do must, if folks are listening on audio, we got the MSU polo rocking today. So we're fitted for this. But you talk about Aidan Hutchinson, you talk about David Ojabo. Well, one of the big moments on the other end was Kenneth Walker III running 5 touchdowns against him in what was a historic day in East Lansing this past year. I mean, the MSU coaching staff has talked about Kenneth Walker III and nicknamed him the eraser because he erases the offensive line's mistakes. And you saw that throughout the year. I kind of see your eyes lighting up a little bit because I hate to throw this name out there because every time you do, it instantly merits the success in accomplishments of him. But his vision was very Barry Sanders-esque. Not saying he's going to be Barry Sanders, but the way he played was that in today's NFL, where you sling the ball around and running backs kind of cog through the machine and are expendable, where does K9 fit in this draft?
Well, first of all, Dalton, the reason my eyes lit up is because I was actually on another radio program, and I basically said the same thing that you just said, was that I'm not sure Michigan State's offensive line was all that great, but because Kenneth Walker was so good, he made them look a lot better than what they were. And I think you saw that in the Peach Bowl. He was able, without him in the backfield, Michigan State just couldn't run the football. Now they found a way to win because that's a Mel Tucker. I mean, there's no team in the country that takes on a coach's personality more than Michigan State, in my opinion. I think Kenneth Walker is a kind of, I'm thrilled to see what he can do behind a good offensive line and what he might be able to do at the next level. I think he's incredibly versatile. I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to be breaking off 45, 50-yard touchdown runs in the NFL. Yeah. But he's the kind of guy, to me, that is always falling forward. He's the guy that can find a gap. And if you need 2 yards, he's going to get you 3. If you need 3 yards, he's going to get you 4. He's just, to me, one of those type of players. I think if he develops even more as a pass catcher, as you mentioned, with the way the NFL is trending, I think he can be a really versatile type of weapon. It's always interesting to me because I feel like running back is maybe the hardest position to grade in the NFL draft because guys that just flourish at the college level, sometimes depending on the number of hits they took at the college level, they just don't pan out. They don't have long careers. So he's a guy I'm interested in, but I do think his vision, his ability, I don't think he's the fastest guy, but he's so elusive. He's so quick. He's got a good step. I think that he can fit in somewhere and he can be a productive back. Maybe that's not as a lead back. Maybe that's a third down back. Maybe that's a backup running back in the NFL. But those guys are still incredibly efficient, and he can make a lot of money doing that for a while.
And I do want to ask here, too, because I want to switch over to Big Ten current, not just so much of the draft. Yeah. But as we look at the draft, there's quite a few prospects we still haven't talked about. Is there anybody that really stands out to you from the crowd? Because you still have the receivers, the pair of Buckeyes. You got Dotson, you got Bell, you got Brisker on the defensive end. Like, who really stands out to you that you're impressed to watch? And I didn't even bring up Tyler Linderbaum. I almost missed him, so I got to at least get his name in there. Who else is in that's sticking out for you, Dustin?
Well, Sam, this is a name that I know you're going to like. I'm shocked that David Bell is not higher. I think he's somewhere in the third or fourth round. He's a player that I don't care what the metrics or analytics or statistics say. He's a baller. Like, he just goes out. He's a gamer. I think he's a kind of player who can catch the football no matter where you throw it. I think he's just got an incredible talent. So I'm interested to see where he goes and what he can do at the next level. When you talk about the wide receiver position, I think Jahan Dotson, he kind of gets overshadowed. He's still projected in the first round, maybe early second, but he's the kind of player that he's been overshadowed by Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And understandably so, those two kids are really good talents. But I think Jahan Dotson, when you've seen what he's been able to do throughout his career, I think he's a player that stands out. As you mentioned, Tyler Linderbaum. Another guy from Penn State, you look at Arnold Ebiketie and the kind of impact he made immediately for that Penn State defensive line. I think he's the kind of player who can go on and have a successful career. You look at the Big Ten in the defensive end position, a lot of really good defensive ends coming out of the conference this year. So those are just a few names. I'm sure there's some other guys. I'm interested to see maybe what Micah McFadden can do, the linebacker out of Indiana. I mean, he was the heart and soul of that defense the past couple of years, in my opinion. So what can his game translate to the next level? Some Minnesota's got some offensive linemen. Daniel Fa'alele, 6'9", 380 pounds. Apparently he can be used as a running back, like they used him in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl to get a touchdown. Just a lot of really good talent in the Big Ten this year. I think that there's potential to be, one of the better draft classes for the Big Ten in 2022. So next week's going to be really exciting.
Well, let's talk current Big Ten football for just a moment here and what we're expecting this upcoming season, because for the life of me, heading into last year, there's no way I could have not seen Ohio State raising the trophy. And, that's why we play the game, and Ohio State doesn't raise the trophy. Michigan ends up finishing out the drought of 17 years without a Big Ten title. They get to win it. As we look and move forward, I feel like it's kind of a similar situation again where when you're looking on paper, the talent that just pops off of Ohio State's sheet is just so gaudy. It's hard not to like them early. Am I wrong with that?
No, because I think there's also the fact that Ohio State has earned it at this point, right? When you win 4 straight Big Ten championships, when you're continually getting to the Big Ten championship game, competitive in the college football playoff, I think you've kind of earned that right. And I think the other factor there involved is the fact that Ryan Day went out and made changes to his defensive staff. He brought in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State. They were able to recruit Tanner McAllister, a defensive back. They brought in some really talented guys. Kai Stokes, a freshman defensive back, looked really good in that spring game, breaking up passes. It showed us why he was the first Buckeye to lose his black stripe. I think when you I don't care who Ohio State's losing offensively, they're going to be just fine. I'm not saying they're going to lead the nation in scoring, but they're going to have a top 10 offense. They're going to be fine. The questions come defensively. And I think when you pair the fact that they've got a ton of talent, always do and always will have a ton of talent on that side of the ball, with one of the best or one of the better defensive minds in the game, I think that's what puts them back on top. And I think when you look at what the Big Ten lost, as you mentioned, Michigan State is losing Kenneth Walker, so we'll see what their offense is going to be able to do. Michigan loses David Ajabo, Aidan Hutchinson, Joshua Ross, Chris Hinton, Dax Hill. They lost their defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. They got a lot of moving parts there at Michigan. Penn State, I've thought Penn State the last 2 or 3 seasons has had the second most talent in the Big Ten, but they go 4-5 in 2020 and they go 7-6 last season. They're replacing their defensive coordinator. They're replacing Arnold Ebiketie, Jaquan Brisker, Ellis Brooks, Jesse Luketa, Brandon Smith, a lot of defensive parts there. Couldn't run the football worth a damn last season, 13th in the Big Ten, 118th nationally. So, to me, it's Ohio State's division. That doesn't mean that Penn State can't beat them. That doesn't mean Michigan State or Michigan can't beat them. to me, Ohio State virtually every year is going to be the team to beat in the Big Ten because they've proven it.
Tell us if we're wrong. Dalton and I both think the West Division, we could see a scenario where any team from the division could come out as the winner. Are we crazy, or is there a clear-cut favorite in the West?
I don't think so, and you can hear my dog in the background lapping up some water there, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
Mine's swinging a tire over there, so we're waiting on her appearance as well.
There we go.
We're dog friendly. Go ahead.
That's right.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a good question. I think it's a 5-team race. I don't think Illinois or Northwestern is going to win the West. Having said that, probably ignited some sort of Fitzy magic where Northwestern, once again, it's an even number year, gets back to the Big Ten championship game somehow, even though they lose to Duke and Southern Illinois in the non-conference, right? That's usually the MO for Northwestern, the Fitzy coach team. But I think you're right. And Nebraska is a team that I think a lot of people might shake their head at, but when you look at the offseason changes they made, bringing in Casey Thompson from Texas to be the quarterback, they added a lot of pieces from the transfer portal. They bring in Mark Whipple as the offensive coordinator. They were so close in so many games a season ago. I do think that they have the potential to make a gigantic leap and be in that conversation. Minnesota, they probably have the best returning set of skill players in the Big Ten with Mohamed Ibrahim, Trey Potts, Tanner Morgan, Chris Ottman-Bell, Dalen Wright, and then you've got Kirk Shiraka running the offense again. He was the mastermind behind that 2019 offense. Purdue, I think, again, they're kind of like Ohio State. I usually don't have much concern in terms of their offense. It's what can they do defensively, especially losing a guy like Karlaftis.
Right.
And I can't remember. Is it Jalen Graham or Jalen Alexander? I always forget those two. One of them's back and one of them went to the NFL draft.
You've got me on that one because I will tell you one and it would be the other.
Exactly. I get those two confused all the time.
Yep.
So one of those guys is gone and they were key. Both those guys were key last season. Iowa and Wisconsin, to me, they've got to figure out something at quarterback. I think the other pieces around them are fine. I think Iowa could easily repeat, and I think Wisconsin could be back on top of the Big Ten West. But we got to see something out of Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. He's had flashes of potential, but at the same time, I think overall his first 2 seasons have been underwhelming. And then you look at Spencer Petras in Iowa. Iowa makes the shift from Brian Ferentz to now be the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. Does that help in some regard? Because now you're working even more closely with the quarterbacks. I don't know. So I do think it's a wide open division. Having said that, to me, almost kind of like Ohio State, I have to lean towards Wisconsin because they tend to prove it. And I think that when you have Braylon Allen and Paul Chryst said this earlier this spring that last season Ches Malusi was not 100%. So now they should have a really good 1-2 punch out of the backfield. And when you look at how good they are in the trenches, offensive and defensive line, I think Wisconsin's the favorite. But I do agree with you guys that I think any of the 5 teams I just mentioned have the potential to be in Indianapolis at the end of the 2022 season.
And Northwestern with the Fitzmagic that you just
right, there you go.
Poor Illinois sitting on an island by itself now. I hadn't realized as I'm trying to like flip my and put my football hat back on from basketball season, but Mo Ibrahim is back at Minnesota again. It feels like he's been there forever.
He has. This will be his 6th season. I was shocked by it. This is a guy who went from, and I'm going to give myself a shameless plug. His story is a really unique story, and I have it pinned to the top of my Twitter profile. He's a great kid. He's a guy that went from scout team player of the year to the Big Ten running back of the year, and now he's returning to Minnesota for his 6th season, and he wants to win a Big Ten championship. He believes that Minnesota can do it. And I have a lot of respect for him because in a day when players just up and transfer because they're not getting enough reps, they're not getting enough playing time, Mo Ibrahim was the scout team player of the year, and then he was behind guys like Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks and some of those other guys. He was 3rd or 4th string running back, and now he's the best running back in the Big Ten and an outside Heisman Trophy contender. So for him to stick it out, keep a positive attitude throughout this, I just have a ton of respect for that because anymore today, and whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, you just don't see that a whole lot.
Right.
Yep. No, it's a very fair point. But, geez, Minnesota had about 5 running backs hurt all last year. Ibrahim being back, that might be a game changer there in Minneapolis. Before we hit our halftime break, I do want to pull up a tweet from about a week ago. Dustin Schutte had tweeted out the 2022 Big Ten quarterback rankings. And don't worry, we won't be as vicious as some of the trolls that you get underneath in your comments. But you had number 1, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, 2, Aidan O'Connell, 3, Talia Tungavailoa, 4, Cade McNamara, 5, Peyton Thorne. Graham Mertz, who you just mentioned a moment ago, comes in at number 8, so pretty far down there for Wisconsin's quarterback. But you take a look at this list, and I'm curious, again, being selfish and going back to my own self-interest here, Cade McNamara and Peyton Thorne at 4 and 5. How did you come to the decision to put McNamara ahead of Thorne?
I think the development I saw from McNamara throughout the course of the season gives me a little bit more confidence in him. And as I told a lot of people on Twitter, we can have a conversation about this. You can flip-flop Thorne and McNamara. You're not going to get an argument from me. You can flip-flop Tanner Morgan and Graham Mertz. You're not going to get an argument from me. But what I saw from Cade McNamara was at the beginning of the season, this kid could, the MO was they couldn't beat you deep. They couldn't throw the football. He went from game manager to a legitimate threat. And I think when you look at the amount of explosive plays that both Michigan State and Michigan had, Michigan, I don't remember what the final tally was, but heading into the college or to the bowl season, Michigan had more explosive plays. They had more plays of 40 or 50 yards than anybody in the Big Ten, and I think they were towards the top in the country. And Cade McNamara was a big part of that. Now, obviously, the way they ran some schemes, and he wasn't always launching a 60-yard pass. Sometimes it was getting a guy open in space and seeing Eric All run 55 yards for a touchdown to beat Penn State, right? So, to me, I think you see how do I want to phrase this? I'm interested to see what Peyton Thorne can do without having the luxury of Kenneth Walker in the backfield. And this takes nothing away from Peyton Thorne. He's a really good quarterback, but he also now doesn't have Jalen Naylor. He's got Jaden Reed, who's a really good receiver. I think that Cade McNamara with the weapons around him is maybe a little bit more proven, and we know what he's going to do. I just kind of want to see Peyton Thorne do it without having Kenneth Walker in the backfield in such a prominent rushing attack.
Fair point. And before Sam jumps in here, I do want to mention too with Cade McNamara, ask the question, is there any kind of concern, and this isn't necessarily just for this ranking sake of conversation, but any kind of concern with the cloud of J.J. McCarthy and the fan that has driven some momentum because they want to see McCarthy take the snaps back there behind center? Is there any concern that might disrupt things in 2022?
I don't think so, because I think when you look at how Cade McNamara has handled it, he was asked about the quarterback competition and said, I see it as I'm a Big Ten championship winning quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean J.J. McCarthy isn't going to challenge for the starting job. That doesn't mean Cade McNamara has it locked up. But I think there's a confidence about him that he knows what he's doing. He understands the offense. He knows what they're trying to accomplish. So I don't think the outside noise is disruptive. I do think it's going to be interesting because when J.J. McCarthy, now that I think he's able to throw again, he didn't throw this spring. When he's back in the mix, I do think he'll challenge. It's going to be interesting. Does Michigan use him like they did last year, where he comes in for, 8 to 10 plays and throws 3 or 4 passes and you run some quarterback sneaks or quarterback keepers, the read option. So it's a good problem to have for Michigan. I don't think your question is out of line or anything. I just think the way that Cade McNamara has handled it, I don't think there's a lot of disgruntlement in that quarterback room, at least right now.
Fair enough.
Winning cures a lot.
Yes, it does.
Well, speaking of winning, let's look at number 1, C.J. Stroud, because kind of going back to the point that we had earlier that Ohio State you're looking at before the year, and you're like, well, that might as well make it 5 in a row at that point if they would have won it. You look at them losing to Michigan at the end of the year, and you see Olave and Garrett Wilson going in. You had a moment where you're like, oh my God, is this the Achilles heel? Or are they going to have a moment of weakness and they become human? And then they play in the Rose Bowl and Jackson Smith and Jigba, it sets the entire Rose Bowl record book. It just seems like it's a factory. And this year, that offense with Stroud and Jigba, Harrison, it's just going to be ridiculous again.
Yep, you're exactly right. And I think that what's going to be interesting is I think that their running back room is in a better spot. Because you watched that game, the spring game, and Travion Henderson looked really good. Evan Pryor, the redshirt freshman, was outstanding in that game. not Marcus Crowley. I'm skipping it. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but they had a third running back who was playing really well. They're 3 deep at the running back position. So I think that they're going to be even better on the ground than they were a season ago. What I want to say about the wide receivers is this is not meant to be an insult. They're not going to have anybody nearly as good as a combination of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba obviously is in that conversation. But I think what they do have is they have more options. Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming. They have some of these other guys coming up. I think that they're going to be able to spread the ball out even more. And I don't know if that makes them more or less dangerous. It's just going to be interesting. I think there might be some hiccups early in the season where you look at it and say, this offense isn't going to be as good as it was last season. But that's because a lot of these kids, like you said, they had to play in the Rose Bowl. That was their first taste. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 3 touchdown catches. All of them came in the Rose Bowl. So there's going to be a bit of a learning curve here. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out of the gate against Notre Dame in a big-time matchup. But long-term, over a 12-game season, there should be no concern about Ohio State's wide receiver room, their running back room, what's going on. I mean, you're right. Factory is the best way to describe it, basically.
It's just year in, year out. I tell you what, Dustin, we're going to take a 1-minute break, and we'll come back. We'll talk some Big Ten basketball before we get you out of here. Is that good with you?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Let's hit halftime, Sam.
You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
Hi, I'm Lauren.
And I'm John.
And we host the Beard Owl Podcast, the podcast where we talk about 2 of the greatest things in the world, beer and Weird Al.
And a bunch of other stuff.
That's right. Do you like nostalgia? Do you like sibling banter? Do you like beer? Do you like Weird Al? Are you human?
If you answered yes to any of those questions, give us a listen. Become one of our loyal commenters.
Hey, you there. We've got a question for you. Are you tired of clickbait stories and the loudest voices driving discussions in culture and entertainment?
If so, I'm Dylan.
I'm Kendall.
And I'm Corey. And we host the podcast From the Middle. We're middle-class guys living in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives with points of view somewhere in the middle.
We take a more reasonable and centrist approach in our discussions covering genres like comedy, culture, entertainment, and interviews, with really interesting folks like business owners, comic creators, doctors, news anchors, New York Times best-selling illustrators, professional stand-up comics, and more. We really value a relaxed and conversational podcast, one that we hope is so fun and laid back, you'll forget you're not actually hanging out with us.
So search at From the Mid Pod, just like it sounds, or check us out everywhere you can find podcasts.
All right, as we're back for the third quarter, Sam will be back in just a moment if you're still on video. But real quick, Dustin, I do want to bring this up because we want to segue over to basketball. And I mentioned to Sam, I'm kind of delusional at this point, or delirious, not knowing when all of this actually airs. But as we were just in that halftime break, Michigan State basketball announced Joey Hauser will be back for another year in East Lansing. That helps out a little bit with the front court. Certainly still doesn't solve the issues that looms in that Michigan State front court, missing Julius Marble, who's transferred out, not really having a true 5. But nonetheless, your reaction to the news that Hauser's back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's big for Michigan State. It's become growingly more difficult to kind of analyze the offseason basketball season because you have no idea who's coming back, NBA draft and whether a guy hires an agent, the transfer portal, all that stuff. But I think when you have a guy who has the experience and kind of the versatility, especially on the shot making with Joey Hauser, I think that's a big bonus for Michigan State. And it's one of those things where, to me, Tom Izzo, I know that the last couple of years haven't gone as well as Michigan State fans would probably like, but Tom Izzo is still one of the best coaches, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. And so I have a lot of faith that he'll be able to get Michigan State back near the top of the Big Ten in no time, and Joey Hauser coming back is obviously a big help for that.
Sam and I were talking about this at the top of the show, between Kofi Cockburn announcing that he's going to go to the NBA draft and, of course, Andre Curbelo transferring to St. John's and some of the different moving pieces. I'm not sure you can look at anybody really today and feel confident in the Big Ten Conference, as we're still too early in this transfer portal process. The team that's maybe winning the most this offseason is Indiana, with Race Thompson coming back, the big recruit they get, and then, of course, still waiting to see what happens with Trace Jackson-Davis. I know Sam doesn't love that news, but I think that's where we sit currently.
Yeah, I could see Sam's scowl on his face because I know Purdue's dominated that series recently. I
worry about the future, Dustin.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I mean, what's been fascinating to me from the Mike Woodson standpoint is when he was hired, I was kind of like, what the hell are they doing? Like, this guy has never coached in the college ranks. He's not going to know how to recruit. I thought it was a reach back to the Knight era that wasn't going to work, but would satisfy a certain demographic or a portion of the fan base that's kind of older. And man, to get them back to the NCAA tournament, to have them snap that 9-game losing streak to Purdue, to win a game in the NCAA tournament, and now what he's doing, the Big Ten right now has 3 5-star recruits for the 2022 basketball cycle, and Indiana has 2 of them, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, and then Malik. Not sure how you pronounce his last name, Renault. So what he's been able to do, get guys back, add some pieces through the transfer portal. Going to be really interesting to see what TJD does. I think you're right. I think right now when you look at it, Indiana's in the best situation, but we've seen teams that have added pieces through the transfer portal. We don't know what Illinois is going to do. They added a 5-star guard in Sky Clark. They're going to have some guys come back that are big contributors. You look at Purdue, Matt Painter has built a pillar of consistency. You look at, I heard you mention about Joe Lenardi's bracketology. I think you were talking about earlier. Wisconsin was on the first 4 out. I mean, they've won the Big Ten regular season 2 of the last 3 years. So Greg Gard is also incredibly consistent. And you always look at that lineup and you're like, how in the hell are these guys any good? But they figure out ways to win, right? So it's really difficult. And again, with the transfer portal, it is almost impossible to make any sort of projection on what the next season is going to look like. We still have a lot of decisions coming out of Michigan, right? We got some guys that haven't made up their mind there, so they could be really good. Who knows what Kevin Miller is going to be able to do at Maryland? What about Rutgers? I mean, there's the Big Ten basketball, even though they've not played well in March the last 2 seasons, I think it's really fascinating because I think top to bottom, it's probably the best coached league, and I think you could say that for the football side too. So really going to be interesting to see how these coaches round out the recruiting, how they hit the transfer portal, who decides to come back, who goes to the NBA draft. Just a lot of moving parts, but I think you're right. It's impossible to assess everything because you just don't know who you're going to lose at any stage to the transfer portal.
So obviously we're talking some basketball here, and we'll get you out of here in just a moment, Dustin. But I do want to shift because I'd be remiss if we don't bring up music a little bit, because Dustin and I, this is the first time we've ever actually seen each other, seen each other's faces. The only interaction we had was Chris Stapleton music, which I was so excited to find somebody like me, sports, Big Ten, Chris Stapleton. So where's your country hierarchy for current artists right now?
Chris Stapleton is absolutely at the top. And to give you a little background, when I was kind of in between jobs, I lived in Orlando, Florida. I worked at the House of Blues at the Disney Springs area there. So I learned a lot about music. I learned a lot about blues, and I grew to love it. So the way I consider his music kind of an extension of blues, the way he uses the harmonica, the songs he sings. To me, he sings about real life. So he's near the top. Some other guys I've liked Jason Aldean in the past. It kind of changes. I'm terrible with names. Let's see.
It's funny you can rip off 3rd string running backs in the Big Ten,
right?
Schools, but then you go artists and you can't.
I'm one of those guys who, if somebody mentions an artist, I'll say, "Who's that?" And then they'll play a song, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course, I've heard that song."
Right. I'm very similar in that.
Stapleton's the one that I got to know because I listened to his music so much. You put me on the spot. I'm gonna have to recharge my brain now to think about where else. What other music? Whiskey Myers for some of those deep into country. I don't know if you guys have heard Whiskey Myers. He's really good. I like his stuff.
Sam shaking his head no. That's much more me. I listen to a lot of Red Dirt stuff. So Cody Johnson, Tyler Childers, those are a lot of my kind of guys, but I know that's not the most popular.
Coulter Wall?
Coulter Wall, yes.
There we go.
Zach Bryan. Yeah, look, we're speaking the same language.
There we go. Perfect.
I'm a Billy Joel Bare Naked Ladies kind of guy.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I'm a music enthusiast, so I can listen to blues, country, hip hop. I can put on jazz. I have 4 or 5 different records of Frank Sinatra. Like I love music. I find different vibes for different moods, different attitudes, and things like that. So I can appreciate just about any type of music except for like the screamo stuff where it's just yelling as loud as you can into the microphone. I can't get into that stuff, but anything else.
Yeah, there are 3 genres that I really don't get into. Death metal is never one. But then like rap and country, I have those favorites from those genres, but I don't really get into them. So it's, I don't, whatever, if you want to love country, go for it. Dalton, that's fine. Dustin, go ahead. It's just not mine.
Well, and I saw from my Twitter stalking of Dustin that Dustin just finished up the weekend. Yeah, how comfortable are you that you're talking to somebody who's actively stalking you? Yeah. But you just wrapped up a weekend in Nashville. I'm heading down to Nashville this weekend. Any big spots I need to swing by?
Oh boy, I mean, just anywhere on Broadway. The key to Nashville, and I've only been there a handful of times, and I went to a Predators game, first NHL game. That was really cool.
I did that last playoffs. It was great.
It's
a great
awesome.
arena.
Yeah, it's awesome. So that was my first introduction to NHL. I'd been to some of the Fort Wayne Comets in the IHL league and some of those minor league Indy Fuel and stuff, but that was my first NHL game. It was awesome. To me, the key in Nashville is if you find a bar with a good band, then just hang out there, because it's pretty much you're going to get to the same thing at just about every bar. So to me, it's not worth fighting the crowd at my age. I'm almost 34 now. If I can just sit down and have a place to sit, not have to walk through the crowd of bachelorette parties and everything, I'm good and content. So that's my tip. Look out for the cheapest place you can get a beer, right? Like, Don't go and spend $10 on Bud Light or something, because some of those places will do that to you. That's for sure.
You mentioned this is the old man in the room, evidently, because he says I'm getting up there in age, almost 34. Yeah, great. I'll be 43 in August. So yeah, thanks. No, but Dalton, why haven't you asked me? You asked Dustin, and I'm glad you did, but you didn't ask me about anything in Nashville. You just said him. Do I get to put my input in?
I don't know. Dustin listens to Chris Stapleton, and he knows Coulter Wall.
I know who Chris Stapleton is.
No, but you got any great tips too, Sam?
Well, my cousin owns a fine chocolate company in Nashville called Chocolate Company.
Okay.
And it's really, really, really good stuff. Highly recommend trying to find where that's at. I think it's down near downtown.
Okay, we'll put that on the list too.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that I think this is now a chain, and I don't know how far it reaches, but you've got to get some sort of Nashville hot chicken, and Hattie B's is the most popular down there. So give that a try too.
I'm scared of that, though, to be honest. I'm terrified of what that hot chicken will do. Go ahead, Sam.
Are you one that occasionally ketchup is too spicy, Dalton?
At times. Well, it just kind of depends.
Fair enough.
But Dustin Schutte from Saturday Tradition, managing editor, we want to thank you so much. We've had a blast here talking with you.
Yeah,
Real quick, but before we actually get you out, let everybody know, if they're not familiar with your work at Saturday Tradition, some of the things you do and why they should be following Saturday Tradition and you on Twitter.
Yeah, if you're a Big Ten fan, I mean, it's Big Ten coverage 24/7. And as you guys kind of alluded to, it's football every single day. We also, we got a pretty heavy amount of basketball content on there. And then we're starting to dip into some of the other sports, right? We did some stuff on wrestling. As you mentioned, baseball and softball. Rutgers had a 15-game winning streak on the baseball side. Nebraska an 18-game winning streak on the softball side. So admittedly, some of those sports don't get as much coverage, but at the same time, we try to do the best we can. If there's a hard-hitting story or stuff we think people want to read about or talk about, we try to get it up on our site. So, and from me personally, I don't know if you want to read any of my stories or anything like that, but I try to keep things fun and light. I think there's too much serious talk in this world. Sports should be a break. I consider myself not a Chris Stapleton entertainer, but my job I view is to take people's minds off real world stuff, off of real work. So I try to keep things light and funny and give sports more of a comical, peaceful approach. So that's what I try to incorporate into my writing style, into my Twitter profile. And like I said, if you're a Big Ten fan, you're not going to get any better Big Ten coverage than what we have on Saturday Tradition.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, Dustin, again, want to thank you so much, man. We've had a blast. Would love to tap on your shoulder again because you're really informative. I think you bring a lot to the table. So throughout the summer, we might tap on your shoulder, hit you up again. But loved having you on, Dustin. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Man.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Dalton. Thanks, Sam. Anytime you guys want to talk Big Ten or talk country music, I'll memorize the artist I listen to next time so I don't draw a blank.
We're going to we'll put another question out there that'll catch off guard now. So
yeah, next time you come back, we need a top 5 current and top 5 all time. So
there we go.
You have homework for when you come back to Big Ten Plus 4. Dustin, take care. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks guys.
All right. Again, Dustin Schutte from Saturday Tradition, managing editor. Boy, did a great job really breaking everything down there. Everything from the Big Ten football side, jumping a little bit into Big Ten basketball. Admittedly so, we talked about it before Dustin even came on, that right now it's just about impossible to grade out where teams stand at this point. But nonetheless, I thought Dustin did a great job here.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And I totally and completely mean this when I say this, okay? This is compliment coming to you. So prepare yourself. Okay. Yes. You have always been kind of, since we started, chatting once I started doing podcasting and stuff, you are the smartest person when it comes to knowing rosters, knowing stats, and how they correlate into the prognostication or reading of whether or not a team's going to be good. And Dustin's right there with you now. So you're you are the smartest one I know, and now he's 1A.
Well, that's a lot of smartness you're giving credit around. You like the word smartness on top of that? That's kind of the joke to kind of kick that out.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I didn't tell you how high that bar is. I just said you're the smartest one.
Fair enough. All right.
Compliment. Backhand.
Let's go ahead and hit the fourth quarter. All right, this is the part of the show where we bring you our headlines, but it's something I've been remiss in doing here, Sam, and I don't know if you're quite ready on your end for the producing side of this, but we do have a weekly poll on Big Ten Plus 4 on social media. Didn't get to that earlier.
I haven't gotten to it on Twitter yet either.
Well, fair enough.
Actually, so wait, since we're recording okay, yeah, go ahead. I just don't have the little banner for it.
See, you're kind of whirling dervish with time now too, aren't you? It's hard to keep track of these things. But our question today focuses back on the NFL draft, and we started the conversation off with Dustin Schutte, and we were asking you, outside of Aidan Hutchinson, who's the second best Big Ten prospect in the NFL draft? Because all the experts have kind of consensus agreed that Aidan Hutchinson's number 1. So we're asking you, who's number 2? We got a list out there with Kenneth Walker III from Michigan State, the running back, George Karlaftis, Tyler Linderbaum, and others, because it's a pretty loaded class for the Big Ten this year.
Well, the 4 options, and I'll put this out here, it will be George Karlaftis, Tyler Linderbaum, Garrett Olson, and Kenneth Walker III.
Okay. So we'll find out from the listeners.
It is Kenneth Walker III, correct?
Kenneth Walker III is correct. My hesitation that I hit was, I thought you said Garrett Olson, and it's Garrett Wilson.
You have Olson in the text you sent me. So, yes, Garrett Wilson.
Typo. Yes, Garrett Wilson.
Hey, I have on good authority that that National Let the Text Ride Day is going to become a thing eventually. And what it is let autocorrect do it, and don't try to change it. So Garrett Olson, we're preparing is what we're doing there.
So yes, my mistake. That is a typo, but Garrett Wilson from Ohio State.
Yes, Wilson.
So now this is the part of the show where we get to our headlines, something that stuck out to us in the past week. And if you're following us on the visual medium, you can see Sam just went supersized. So Sam with the Sam Sentinel, what do we got?
Mine is titled, Today I Consider Myself the Luckiest. No, wait, that's already taken. Over 2.8 million minutes have poured through the hourglass into the sand called yesterday since the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. They exercised 108 years of demons, and that would think about all the life that has passed, all the life events, all the world events that have happened, and years that went by from the time span that they went without a championship. I've accepted in my life what the Cubs were pre-2016. They actually, honestly, I credit that, being a Cubs fan, with kind of how I've developed as an adult, because I can deal with disappointment. And I kind of chuckle at that, but it's serious. I'm able to adjust to life events and handle them a little bit better because I have been a Cubs fan. I have known heartache beyond heartache. And I have only been alive. I was 37 when they won. So it's only 37 years I had to deal and accept with that. And I say only because 6 years ago they won the World Series.
Yep. I
understand what that did. It exercised a lot of demons for more than just the organization, but for its fan base. But since then, we've gone from, they're a contender, to, pieces are leaving. This was the first year. Even last year, there were hopes that the Cubs could be a playoff team. This year, there was not that there wasn't hope. Fans have hope all the time, but there wasn't any legitimate hope. So I think we've returned to our lane of what we are as Cubs fans and what we're going to get from the team. Do I think that they'll never compete again? No, not at all. But I am one of the lucky people that was alive to experience the one time they did stand atop of the baseball world, and I know that I can die a happy man. That's the Sam Sentinel.
I like it. And if we do the math, next Cubs World Series title should be 21-24.
Correct.
108 years after 2016. So, yeah. But no, nonetheless, it's a nice personal piece because, of course, we know what Cubs fans have been through for all their lives.
Goodness, yes.
So with the Dalton Daily, I'm going to stick with baseball as well. I'm going to take a look at the Anthony brothers. And if you haven't heard this story, this comes out of the Big Ten. The Iowa Hawkeyes had a player just a week ago that had a military surprise visit. You know all those that you see on SportsCenter and on the news where a family member comes out from the military and surprises? Well,
that's
Iowa baseball.
I'm not crying, you're crying response.
Yes. So Iowa had one of those where Keaton Anthony, a star freshman for the Hawkeyes, actually had just won Big Ten Freshman of the Week. He and the Iowa baseball team are heading to Bradley. What he doesn't know is his brother, Carson, who's stationed between Tennessee and Kentucky, finds out he has a day off, and he wants to go see his brother play. Now, the Anthonys are both from Georgia, and Carson, being stationed between Tennessee and Kentucky, says, I can make the drive to Peoria, Illinois to watch Iowa take on Bradley at this game. And so mom of the Anthony brothers calls Iowa baseball and calls Coach Heller and says, hey, Carson is going to get to the game and see Keaton play. Is there anything you guys can do? Iowa and Coach Heller make the phone call now to Bradley baseball, and they talk with Bradley about what they could possibly do, and they decide, absolutely, we can make something happen. We'll do a special military recognition announcement before the game. We'll hide Keaton in the dugout so he doesn't really know what's going on. Carson will hide elsewhere. We'll bring him out and surprise him. So all this comes together within about a 30-hour time window.
Wow.
everything, all the pieces just boom, come together. And the next thing you know, Carson's there in Peoria, Illinois. Iowa's getting ready to play. Carson gets announced, led out onto the field, and Keaton, stunned, comes running out of the dugout, grabs his brother, gives him a big hug. And I spoke with Keaton about the moment, and Keaton says it was the first time he had seen him since around Christmas time.
Oh, wow.
And even then, that had been about 7 months since he had last seen him, and he didn't know when he was going to see him again because he's getting ready to be transferred to Washington. And has no idea when the next time he would see him is. So that moment to organically pop up, and for those two brothers and for the Anthony family that was sitting at home and got to see the moment, that was one that kind of brought all the feels out, because goodness gracious, what a cool moment. And of course, it's awesome that it happened in the Big Ten, but it's just awesome to see one of those military moments. And do want to give a salute to not only the Anthonys for putting that and having a special moment, but for Bradley baseball to come in that final hour and make something happen. So kudos all around. That's a really cool moment that I wanted to bring to the table.
And good on, obviously Iowa, because it was their player that had was affected. It was his brother, but thank you to Bradley. Good on them.
Yep.
For, absolutely embracing it and making it just a possibility, because if you don't have that, the other school doesn't want to do, or whatever, doesn't do it, it's still special. It's still very special because he's there. But to make it, heroes need to be recognized, and that was great that Bradley did that.
Yeah, it was
fantastic.
Pretty special. Real quick, Sam, before we get out of here, let the fine folks know where they can find us each week.
Yeah, we if you're watching on video, you can see above our heads at the top, we have the Twitter handle that at Big Ten Plus. Spell out the word plus, not the plus sign. Spell it out. Number 4, so Big Ten Plus 4. Spell out plus. Facebook Big Ten, the symbol plus. See, I'm so confused. I'm just keeping y'all on your toes. And then you can also go to oddpodsmedia.com, find our page there. We are on ASAP Network. We stream there every week. You can find us our video on Spotify, but the audio is also available on Spotify, and then everywhere else there's podcasts. So find us, listen,
all right,
subscribe, like, comment, do whatever. Keep us in your head.
That's right. Yeah, because you never want to get rid of Dalton and Sam in your head.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
great.
It's a very dull life if you do
that. All right. From Big Ten Plus 4, we do want to thank all of you for tuning in and watching and listening this week. Make sure you check us out next week. And for Sam Sprunger, I'm Dalton Shetler. So long. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later.